spiritual but not religious folks. When we talk about God as person, we're not literally thinking about God as a person. We mean by person certainly all that we imagine by that, but we mean so much more than that. We recognize that it took the universe 14 billion years to arrive at personhood. It's amazing. We can think rationally. We can shape our own futures. We can take the perspective of others. That's a very complex evolutionary development. So when we're thinking about God as person, we're thinking, well, God's certainly all that, because that's the highest that this universe has got to. But God's far beyond what we mean by that. So don't imagine that we're literally thinking about God as a big daddy in the sky. Please. On the other hand, we have a lot to learn from our SBNR friends, I think. Our New Age thought brothers and sisters who realize that this second-person face of God doesn't tell the whole story. There's another face of God that comes from every mystical tradition of the great religions. God is the great I am. And the mainline church has an almost phobic aversion to this God. This God just doesn't show up in our worship, by and large. What we know, empirically, is that through meditation, contemplation, and sometimes spontaneously, the boundaries of our ego can dissolve, and we just discover that we're one with all that is. We're one with all of creation. That's nature mysticism. We're one with spirit. You know, when Jesus talks about in the reading we just heard, you know, his longing was for them to know that they are one with the Father and one with him. He's coming from this state of consciousness. It's a real experience. We can actually experience this. And those people who have tapped into this oneness to their face before creation is born often lose their fear of death, often stop worrying about life because they realize that things may come and go, we may come and go, but death is not the final story. This consciousness, this all-pervading awareness, makes them realize that we are not that which we are aware of, we are that which is aware. And you get in touch with that, and you realize we participate in eternity. That's who we are. You strip away all the roles and rules and regulations and identities. We are that which is aware of all that is. It doesn't come and go. We drop into that great I amness. Eckhart Tolle writes about this face of God, right? Power of now. So we hear Jesus saying to the crowds, before Abraham was, I am. You go, what? You didn't even know Abraham. What are you talking about? Before Abraham was, I am. What's that about? It's deeply threatening to the religious institution to hear this kind of topic if you haven't experienced it for yourself. You just think it's craziness. You just think it's a massive inflation of your ego. But what Jesus was talking about wasn't just exclusive to Jesus. Jesus was saying, before Abraham was, I am. And that kind of consciousness is available to all of you. Because his deep wish was that his disciples would experience this. That I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and you are in me. All this unitive consciousness, you see. Meister Eckhart, one of our mystics in our tradition, said, you know, as far as he was concerned, the best name he could come up with for God was isness. Isness. Right? He got it. So there are dangers associated with this, and I talked about them briefly. Because anybody of us right now, we could touch into this space. I could lead you into an experience where you would realize your I amness. But then when you came back down and went out into the world, it gets translated by the stage of consciousness that we're at. So the ego is kind of an acquisitive little beggar, right? So the ego is going to take that experience and say, I am God. And the ego is going to get off on this. And the ego is going to start saying crazy stuff like, I can just have the thought that I'm going to get $1 million and it's going to manifest. It's going to arrive in a check in the mail next week. I can just imagine world peace and it's going to happen. Right? So you need to be a little careful, but that doesn't diminish the reality of this first-person face of God. And we need to get a lot more comfortable with this face of God in the mainline churches. This is why this first-person face of God practice, and it is a practice, it's not just kind of some abstract concept. This practice really needs to be balanced by second-person devotion, because the ego doesn't do devotion. Devotion dissolves ego. Right? The ego wants to be worshipped. Doesn't want to worship. Doesn't want to get down on its knees and go, I totally give myself in love to you. Ego doesn't do it. So that's why we need this second-person aspect. So let me move down to the third-person face of God. Are you still with me here? Because this is kind of dense, right? All right, good. Thank you. So you got second person we're comfortable with. This first person that we're less comfortable. What's the third-person face of God all about? The third-person face of God is the astounding face of God that we find in creation. And we keep getting more gobsmacked with more scientific discoveries, not less. Cosmology, biology, quantum physics, chaos theory, all point to a vast evolutionary intelligence at work in the universe. And we are members of that vast interconnected system, the great whole, Gaia, that keeps us, this intricately balanced web that sustains us and gives us life. And we know that each part of that whole, you and I, are holographic representations of the whole. The whole universe is contained in you and it's contained in me right at this moment. I mean, to really get this third-person face of God is to drop to your knees. It's the external form of spirit in creation. But notice my language. So this is the great I-it. Notice my language. Great system. The whole. Holograms. Evolutionary intelligence. Not a person. An it. Not personhood. It's standing on top of the Grand Canyon and just being overwhelmed by the majesty of what you see. If we're waking up every morning, lucky as we are in Vancouver, and looking out at the mountains, wow, just falling into a kind of deep reverence for what we're involved in, for the pleasure of being able to take it in. And the church also hasn't had much room for this third-person face of God. I mean, you folks have got it because I wrote a book largely based in this third-person face of God, Darwin, Divinity, and the Dance of the Cosmos, and it's incorporated into our liturgy and our prayers. But by and large, we're kind of focused on that second person. And here's an interesting thing that happens with the first, second, and third-person face of God. They begin to flow into each other. They're not as distinct as we might see, or as it might seem. I can be in a state of devotion to my beloved other. And all of a sudden I begin to feel like I'm one with that beloved other. Or I can be chanting, getting in that state of consciousness about the great I am and just fall into love with this presence who begins to feel like this beloved other that's coming towards me, with whom I'm in relationship with. And the same thing can happen in nature. We've all had that experience where we're out canoeing or hiking through a mountain, and we just have this sense of unity of consciousness. So each is a portal unto the other. The thing about these three faces is that these aren't just concepts. We need to practice them. And one of the exciting things that we're going to be doing here at Canadian Memorial is we're going to be developing practices for each of you to be able to actually enter into this experience of the Holy. May it be so.